Hi everyone, I'm Nora, and welcome back to Dark Justice. Tonight, we uncover a story that hides behind the illusion of a perfect life. A story of love turned to poison, and a betrayal so cold it shook an entire community. On the surface, 32-year-old Stacy Hunsucker had everything. A devoted husband, 2 beautiful daughters, and a picture-perfect home in Mount Holly, North Carolina. To her friends, she was the happiest woman they knew, a teacher, a mother, a friend with an easy laugh and a kind heart. But behind that smile, something was wrong. Her body was failing her, her health slipping away, and no one could understand why. Doctors were baffled. Tests revealed nothing. And as Stacy's world slowly dimmed, the man who vowed to love her in sickness and in health was the one orchestrating every moment of her suffering. This is the case of Stacy Robinson Hunsucker, a woman whose mysterious illness masked a calculated murder. A mother who trusted too deeply, and a husband who believed he'd found the perfect crime. Let's step into the shadows and uncover how a flight paramedic, a man trained to save lives, used his knowledge to take one. Stacy Hunsucker was the kind of woman everyone loved to be around. She had a soft voice, a bright smile, and an energy that made people feel safe. Her friends often said she could walk into a room and change its mood instantly. She worked hard, loved harder, and never complained. Life in Mount Holly, North Carolina, was simple, and Stacy embraced that simplicity. She lived for her 2 little girls, Piper and Willow, and for the man she had loved since she was young, Joshua Hunsucker. To most people, they were a dream couple. Joshua was tall, confident, and charming. Stacy was kind, loyal, and patient. Together, they looked like the picture of stability a family people admired, the kind that posted smiling photos online and shared stories of vacations, birthdays, and milestones. But no one saw the cracks beneath that perfect image. Joshua worked as a flight paramedic, a respected and demanding job that kept him away from home for long hours. Stacy trusted him completely. She believed he was out saving lives while she managed their home, cared for the children, and tried to make everything around her beautiful. But something in that house wasn't right. There were arguments, moments of cold silence, and a growing distance that Stacy tried to ignore. When friends asked how she was, she'd smile and say, "We're fine, just busy." But she wasn't fine. Over the years, Stacy's health began to deteriorate in ways no one could explain. It started with small things: fatigue, headaches, nausea. Then came the dizziness and shortness of breath. She went to doctors, specialists, anyone who could give her answers. Every test came back normal. No infections, no disease, no reason for her to feel like her body was slowly shutting down. She blamed it on stress, on being a mum, on doing too much. Joshua seemed concerned at first. He told her to rest, that she was just tired. He brought her water, helped with the kids occasionally, and reminded everyone how hard she worked. But behind closed doors, his behavior began to change. He became distant, controlling, and at times cruel. He wanted to know where she was, who she talked to, what she ate. He made decisions for her: what medication she should take, what doctor she should see, even what food she should avoid. Stacy thought he was being protective. In truth, he was testing how much control he could have. Around this time, friends noticed Joshua was spending more money than usual. Expensive purchases, secret trips, and new accounts started to appear. When Stacy questioned him, he'd dismiss it as work-related or say she was overreacting. What she didn't know was that Joshua had already started plotting. He was building a story of a wife who was sick, unstable, and perhaps dying from some mysterious illness. Slowly, that narrative began to take shape, and Stacy became its tragic centerpiece. Her parents noticed the change too. They described her as looking exhausted and pale. She lost weight rapidly, her once bright energy fading into weakness. Still, Stacy refused to believe anything was truly wrong at home. She loved Joshua. She believed in the vows they made in sickness and in health. But behind every act of concern, Joshua was hiding something darker. As Stacy's health continued to fail, the man she trusted most was experimenting with ways to end her life quietly, methodically, and without suspicion. No one knew it yet, but Stacy Hunsucker's home was about to become the scene of a slow, invisible murder. It started quietly. Stacy's symptoms became unpredictable, coming and going without pattern. One week she'd feel better, the next she'd collapse from exhaustion or unbearable pain. She told her friends she was scared but tried to stay positive for her children. Joshua played the part of the supportive husband. He drove her to appointments, spoke to doctors, and always appeared calm and attentive. But behind his kindness was calculation. He knew exactly what he was doing. As a flight paramedic, Joshua understood how the human body worked, how much a person could take before collapsing, and how to make it all look natural. He began introducing things into Stacy's diet, small doses of substances that would mimic natural illness. Each episode made her weaker, each test result came back clean. He was perfecting the illusion of a mystery disease. Stacy's friends started to notice that her drinks often tasted strange. Once, she mentioned her water smelled odd, almost metallic. Joshua brushed it off, saying it was probably the pipes, or maybe the vitamins she was taking. He always had an answer, a calm explanation that made sense in the moment, and Stacy, desperate to believe her husband, never questioned it further. Over time, she began to rely on him more. She stopped driving as much, stopped meeting friends, and avoided going out without him. It was subtle, but Joshua had isolated her completely. He was the only one who truly understood her condition, or so she thought. By late 2017, Stacy's health had become critical. She would collapse suddenly, shaking uncontrollably, her heart racing as if it might stop. Yet every hospital visit ended with doctors shaking their heads. No toxins, no heart issues, no infection. Her body was dying, but science couldn't explain why. What no one knew was that Joshua had access to dangerous chemicals and medical substances through his job. He handled medications, fluids, and emergency treatments daily. And in those tools, meant to save lives, he found his weapon. He had studied how different toxins behaved, which ones left traces, and which didn't. He knew how to mimic seizures, cardiac events, and fainting spells, and he used that knowledge with chilling precision. When Stacy's family came to visit, Joshua was all charm. He'd serve drinks, smile, and talk about how hard it was watching her decline. He'd say things like, "I just wish I could fix her. I feel helpless." Her parents believed him. They thought their son-in-law was doing his best. No one imagined he was the reason their daughter was dying. In early 2018, Stacy's condition took another turn. Her hair began to fall out. Her skin grew pale and fragile. She could barely eat without vomiting. Joshua told doctors she might have developed an autoimmune disorder. He offered to monitor her vitals at home, explaining that he had the medical training to keep her safe. It was the perfect setup. He controlled everything she took in, every pill, every glass of water. But even Joshua couldn't hide his arrogance forever. He began bragging to a co-worker, hinting that he could make someone sick and no one would ever know. It sounded like dark humor, but those words would later come back to haunt him. As weeks passed, Stacy grew weaker and more confused. She journaled about her symptoms, writing that she felt like her body was shutting down, but no one believed her. Her handwriting became shaky, her entries shorter. One of her last notes read, "I don't feel safe anymore." Whether she meant physically or emotionally, no one knows. What's certain is that by the time summer arrived, Stacy Hunsucker's fate was already sealed, and the man who swore to save her life was about to finish what he started. By the summer of 2018, Stacy Hunsucker was a shell of the woman she used to be. Her once bright eyes had dulled, her body frail, and her laughter, the kind her friends used to call contagious, was gone. Every step she took seemed painful, yet she kept going. She had 2 daughters who needed her, and she was determined to fight whatever was happening to her. But the truth was, she was fighting something she couldn't see, something living right inside her own home. Joshua had perfected his role as the grieving husband long before the tragedy even happened. He told people Stacy had mysterious heart problems, that her health was failing fast and doctors couldn't do anything about it. He would show up to work exhausted, telling co-workers he was worried sick. Some believed him. Others noticed something unsettling about the way he spoke of her, detached, emotionless, like he was talking about a patient instead of his wife. In private, Joshua grew colder. He controlled her medications, her food, and even her sleep. If she complained, he'd accuse her of being dramatic. He told her she was losing her mind, that her anxiety was making her sicker. Slowly, he convinced her that everything wrong in her life was her fault. Gaslighting her became part of his daily routine. Stacy's friends grew more concerned. They'd call and check on her, but she often didn't answer. When she did, her voice was weak and distant. She'd apologize for not calling back and blame it on exhaustion. Once, her best friend stopped by unannounced and found Stacy barely able to stand. Joshua came to the door, thanked her for visiting, and said Stacy just needed rest. He didn't let her in. That was the last time anyone outside the family saw Stacy alive. By September, her body had completely given up. She suffered constant pain, could hardly breathe, and was too weak to move without help. Joshua insisted on taking care of her himself. He said hospitals only made her worse. What no one knew was that he was keeping her under constant control, carefully administering doses of poison disguised as supplements and medication. It was slow, deliberate, and cruel. In the final weeks, Stacy began to sense the truth. She confided in a friend over text that she thought Joshua might be hiding something from her, maybe even hurting her. The friend told her to leave, but Stacy didn't. She was terrified, dependent, and emotionally trapped. She wanted to believe the man she married wouldn't harm her. On the night of September 23, 2018, everything came to an end. Joshua called 911. His voice panicked, claiming Stacy had collapsed and wasn't breathing. Paramedics rushed to the home, but she was already gone. Her death was ruled natural cardiac arrest. No one suspected murder. Joshua cried in front of family, held his daughters, and played the role of the devastated widower flawlessly. At the funeral, he stood over her casket, silent and expressionless. Some thought it was grief. Others felt something off a void behind his eyes, as if he wasn't mourning but watching the final scene of a performance he had written himself. Within weeks, he collected her life insurance and began moving on. He told friends he was trying to stay strong for his girls, but even then, he couldn't resist bragging to co-workers, slipping comments about how easy it was to make someone sick. It sounded like another dark joke, but it wasn't. Because behind every word was the truth, a truth that wouldn't stay buried for long. Joshua Hunsucker thought he had committed the perfect crime, but the cracks in his story were about to break wide open. For months after Stacy's death, Joshua Hunsucker lived like a free man. He played the part of the grieving husband flawlessly, but behind closed doors, his behavior began to raise eyebrows. He started spending money recklessly, going on trips, buying new clothes, and even flirting with other women. To outsiders, it looked like he was moving on too fast. To those who knew Stacy, it felt wrong, disrespectful, even chilling. Her family couldn't shake the feeling that something about her death didn't add up. Stacy's mother, Susie Robinson, said it best. A mother knows when something isn't right. She'd seen her daughter healthy, active, and full of life just a few years earlier. How could someone that vibrant die so suddenly with no real explanation? She began asking questions, and she wasn't alone. Rumors spread quietly around Mount Holly. Some of Joshua's co-workers remembered his strange jokes about poisoning and illness. One even mentioned that he had once said he could make someone sick and nobody would ever find out. When investigators learned about that comment, it became the first thread in what would unravel his entire lie. In early 2019, a detective from the Gaston County Police Department reopened Stacy's case. They ordered a full toxicology test, something that hadn't been done during the initial autopsy. What came back shocked everyone. Traces of unusual chemicals were found in her system, substances commonly used in aviation medicine and paramedic work. These were compounds Joshua had direct access to. Investigators began quietly building a case. They interviewed his co-workers, reviewed his pharmacy records, and tracked every medication he had ordered during his shifts. What they found was chilling several substances unaccounted for, the same ones that matched what was found in Stacy's body. They also discovered something even more disturbing. Just weeks before her death, Joshua had increased Stacy's life insurance policy. He made himself the sole beneficiary, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. When questioned, he said it was for family security, but detectives saw it differently: motive. Slowly, the perfect facade Joshua had built began to crumble. When investigators interviewed Stacy's friends, they described a woman who was terrified, isolated, and confused. One friend showed text messages where Stacy wrote, "He says I'm sick, but I don't know what's happening. I think he's lying to me." Those words painted a haunting picture of a woman trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. By the summer of 2019, police had enough evidence to dig deeper. They exhumed Stacy's body for additional testing, confirming the presence of rare toxins that should never have been in her bloodstream. The results were clear: Stacy Hunsucker had been poisoned. In September 2019, 1 year after her death, detectives brought Joshua in for questioning. He was calm, confident, and still believed he could outsmart them. He told elaborate stories, blaming her condition on stress, postpartum complications, and genetics. But investigators had his pharmacy logs, text messages, and financial records in front of them. They confronted him with the evidence, and his calm demeanor began to crack. When asked about the missing medications, he stumbled. When asked about his co-workers' statements, he went silent. Then came the final blow. A search of his home revealed a collection of medical vials, hidden syringes, and handwritten notes about dosages. They had found his playbook. Within days, Joshua Hunsucker was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and multiple counts of tampering with medical supplies. The town of Mount Holly was stunned. The man once known as a lifesaver had turned out to be a cold, methodical killer. But for Stacy's family, it wasn't relief yet. They wanted justice. They wanted the world to know what really happened to their daughter, and that Joshua's lies had finally caught up with him. When news of Joshua Hunsucker's arrest broke, the community of Mount Holly was in disbelief. How could the man everyone saw as a hero, a flight paramedic who saved countless lives, be accused of killing his own wife? For Stacy's family, the arrest brought both heartbreak and relief. They had waited a long time to hear someone finally say what they already knew in their hearts. Stacy didn't die from illness. She was murdered. The trial began in early 2022. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and friends who had come to hear the truth. The prosecution laid out a chilling story of manipulation, greed, and control. They detailed how Joshua had poisoned his wife over time, carefully using substances from his job, and how he staged her illness to make it look natural. They showed the jury text messages, medical records, and the results from the toxicology reports. Every detail pointed to Joshua's guilt. The defense tried to paint him as a loving husband who had simply made medical mistakes. They argued that Stacy had underlying health issues, that the evidence was circumstantial. But with each witness that took the stand, Joshua's mask slipped further. Co-workers testified about his disturbing comments, his arrogance, and his fascination with toxins. One paramedic said Joshua once laughed and said, "You'd be surprised what you can get away with if you know what you're doing." The courtroom fell silent. Stacy's parents sat through every word, holding hands, tears streaming down their faces as they listened to how their daughter's final months had been filled with pain and confusion, caused by the very man she trusted most. When Joshua took the stand, he tried to sound calm, but his arrogance showed through. He spoke about himself more than his wife, often referring to Stacy's death as an unfortunate event. It only made things worse. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with their verdict guilty on all counts. Joshua Hunsucker was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Stacy's family, it was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but nothing could bring her back. Her daughters, Piper and Willow, were left to grow up without their mother and, thankfully, without the influence of the man who took her life. Outside the courthouse, Stacy's mother spoke to the press. Her voice trembled, but her words were strong. "My daughter didn't die in vain," she said. Joshua thought he could hide what he did. But God and truth always find their way. Those words resonated across the community. People who once admired Joshua now spoke of him with disgust. The story of Stacy Hunsucker became a warning, a reminder that evil can hide behind the most ordinary smiles. In the years since, Stacy's family has kept her memory alive. They've shared her story to raise awareness about domestic abuse and the subtle signs of control that often go unnoticed until it's too late. They describe her as compassionate, creative, and devoted, a woman who gave everything to her family. Even in death, Stacy's light continues to shine. Joshua Hunsucker sits in a prison cell now, stripped of his uniform, his title, and his freedom. The man who thought he could play God now spends every day behind bars, haunted by the truth he tried to bury. And as the world moves on, one thing remains certain: Stacy's story will never be forgotten. It stands as a testament to love betrayed, justice served, and a reminder that sometimes the darkest evil wears the face of someone we trust most.